The man in the suit looked at the truck and laughed. Not a polite laugh, not the kind a person tries to hide. A full, open, head-back laugh that carried across the entire parking lot of Hargrove Automotive Solutions and landed on every person within 40 feet like a slap. "That," said Marcus Bellingham, pointing at the 1953 Chevrolet 3100 pickup sitting on the flatbed, "is the most beautiful piece of junk I have seen in 20 years of collecting. I mean that sincerely. It belongs in a scrapyard, not in my facility." Joel Carter stood beside the flatbed with his hands in his pockets and said nothing. He was 41 years old, Nigerian-American, with his father's broad shoulders and his mother's patience, and 11 years of running the best independent restoration shop in the county behind him. He had driven 4 hours that morning to deliver the truck to Hargrove's annual consignment auction preview, the one where serious collectors came to place advance bids before the public auction. He had spent 14 months on this truck. 14 months of sourcing, stripping, rebuilding, and restoring every component to factory original specification. He had brought his daughter. Zoe was 10 years old, and she was standing beside him with her arms folded and her dark eyes fixed on Marcus Bellingham with an expression that her father recognized, and that had, on more than one occasion, made grown adults reconsider their position. Bellingham was still laughing. "What are you asking for it?" he said, wiping his eye. "I want to know so I can tell the story later." $1.2 million, Joel said. Bellingham stopped laughing. "I'm sorry," he said. $1.2 million, Joel said. "It's a frame-off restoration. Original drivetrain, all matching numbers, correct trim code, documented provenance back to the original purchaser. There are fewer than 30 known surviving examples in this condition." Bellingham looked at the truck. He looked at Joel. He looked at the truck again. "Son," he said, and Joel was 41 years old, and Marcus Bellingham was 58, and the word landed exactly the way it was intended to. "That truck is worth $40,000 on a good day to a very sentimental buyer. It is not worth $1.2 million to anyone alive. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I am telling you, as a professional courtesy, to go home and reconsider your pricing before you embarrass yourself publicly." He walked away. Joel stood in that parking lot and watched him go. Zoe unfolded her arms. "Dad," she said. "I know," he said. "He's wrong," she said. "I know," he said. If you are new to this channel, stay right here, because what happens over the next 9 days is going to make you want to subscribe and never leave. Hit that button right now and turn on the bell. We put out stories every week that hit exactly like this one. Now let's get back to Joel. Joel Carter had not always been a restoration specialist. He had started as a general mechanic in his early 20s, working out of a rented bay in a shared shop in the city. After his wife Ngozi died, Zoe was 3. It was sudden, a blood clot, the kind of thing that happens without warning and restructures everything. He had thrown himself into the work the way some men throw themselves into drinking. It was the only thing that quieted the inside of his head. Classics specifically. The older, the more neglected, the more defeated-looking, the better. There was something about finding a car that everyone else had given up on and returning it to what it had always been underneath the rust and the damage and the years of being misunderstood. He had never said that out loud, but Zoe knew. She had grown up watching him, sitting on her stool in the corner of the shop since she was 4 years old, absorbing everything without needing to be taught. The 1953 Chevrolet 3100 had come to him in pieces. Literally, in 14 separate cardboard boxes and a rolling chassis, purchased from the estate of a retired schoolteacher in rural Kentucky whose father had bought the truck new in 1953 and whose family had kept every single original component when the truck stopped running in 1987, putting them carefully in labeled boxes in a barn where they had sat for 35 years. Joel had recognized immediately what he was looking at. He had spent 14 months putting it back together. The matching numbers alone, engine, transmission, and body all carrying the original factory stampings, put it in a category of perhaps 30 surviving examples in this state of completeness. The correct trim code, verified against factory records, narrowed it further. The documented provenance from the original purchaser made it something genuinely rare. 1.2 million was not an aggressive ask. It was, if anything, conservative. Marcus Bellingham had been wrong in a parking lot in front of 40 people and Joel's 10-year-old daughter. The problem was that Bellingham ran Hargrove Automotive Solutions, which ran the region's most prestigious collector car auction, and his opinion in this world carried the kind of weight that could make or break a consignment before the auction doors opened. By that evening, Joel had received 3 messages from other collectors who had been in that parking lot. None of them were offers. All of them were variations of, heard what Bellingham said, wanted you to know, sorry it didn't go better. Joel sat at his kitchen table that night with his phone face down, and a plate of food Zoe had reheated from the previous evening's leftovers, jollof rice, which she made badly but with tremendous confidence, and he stared at the wall. Eat, Zoe said, from across the table, not looking up from her book. He ate. He was wrong, she said again, still not looking up. I know. So what are we going to do about it? Joel looked at his daughter. She was reading a book about automotive history, specifically the chapter on post-war American truck manufacturing, which she had started 2 days before the auction preview and which she had clearly been reading with a purpose. What are you thinking? He said. She looked up. I'm thinking we need someone who actually knows what they're looking at. She was 10. Go to bed, he said. I'm right though, she said. She was. The thing about Zoe Carter was that she had inherited her father's eye. Not learned, inherited. She could look at a car and tell you what was wrong with it and what it had been and what it could be again. And she was right with a frequency that Joel had stopped being surprised by around the time she turned 8. She had also, at age 10, developed a habit of researching things thoroughly before she spoke, which meant that when she had an opinion, it was rarely an opinion and usually a conclusion. The book she was reading had a chapter on significant post-war American truck auctions. One of the names in that chapter was Elena Voss. Elena Voss was 71 years old and had spent 40 years as one of the foremost authorities on American post-war vehicles in the country. She had written the definitive reference books on the subject. She had consulted for major auction houses, museums, and private collectors. She had a reputation for being entirely immune to the social dynamics of the collector car world. She said what a car was worth, and she didn't adjust that number based on who was in the room or what their feelings were about it. She also, according to the chapter Zoe had been reading, had a particular expertise in 1947 to 1955 Chevrolet trucks, which she considered among the most undervalued American vehicles of the post-war era. Zoe left the book open to that page on the kitchen table when she went to bed. Joel found it at 11 that night when he came back downstairs for water. He read the chapter. He sat down. He looked up Elena Voss. He sent her an email at 11:47 at night with 12 photographs of the truck attached and a provenance summary and a single sentence at the end. I was told today that this truck is worth $40,000. I believe it is worth considerably more. I would value your assessment. He did not expect a reply until the following week at the earliest. Elena Voss replied at 6:14 the next morning. Her email contained 4 words and a phone number. Call me right now. He called her. She answered on the first ring. Where is this truck? She said without preamble. My shop, Joel said, about 4 hours from. I'll be there Thursday, she said. Don't let anyone touch it. She hung up. Joel sat with the phone in his hand for a moment. Then he went upstairs and stood in the doorway of Zoe's room. She was already awake. She looked at him. She's coming Thursday, he said. Zoe nodded like this was the outcome she had expected and picked up her book. This story is not done escalating, I promise you that. Before we go further, drop a comment below right now and tell us, did you believe in Joel when Bellingham laughed at him? Tell us where you stand. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Keep watching. Elena Voss arrived Thursday in a dark green Land Rover that had seen considerable use and a canvas field jacket that had seen more. She was small, white-haired, sharp-eyed, and she walked directly past Joel to the truck without introducing herself, which Joel had been warned about by two people who had worked with her before. She spent 40 minutes with the truck. She did not speak during those 40 minutes. She moved around it, under it, through it, with the methodical attention of someone who had been doing this for 4 decades and had developed a personal relationship with this particular era of vehicle that went beyond expertise into something closer to fluency. Zoe sat on her shop stool in the corner and watched Elena Voss work with the focused attention of a student watching a master. When Elena finally stood up, she turned to Joel. "Where did you find the provenance documentation?" she said. "It came with the car," Joel said. "The family kept everything." "The bill of sale from 1953. "Yes." "The original window sticker." "Yes." Elena Voss looked at him for a long moment. "Do you know what you have?" "I believe I do," Joel said. "Marcus Bellingham doesn't agree." "Marcus Bellingham," Elena said, with a particular flatness that communicated her opinion of Marcus Bellingham more clearly than any adjective could have, once told me that a 1955 Nomad in show condition was worth $80,000. It sold at Barrett Jackson for $430,000. What you have here is considerably more significant than a Nomad. Joel was quiet. "This truck," Elena said, turning back to it, "is one of fewer than 20 surviving examples in the country with all matching numbers, correct trim code, original documentation, and a complete frame-off restoration to factory specification. The market for this specific vehicle has moved considerably in the last 3 years. I've seen comparable examples, less complete than this one, sell privately for between $1.8 and $2.4 million. Joel sat down on a nearby stool. "Your ask of $1.2 million, Elena continued, was not aggressive. It was generous to the buyer. "Bellingham told me it was worth $40,000, Joel said. "Bellingham was either uninformed or deliberately misleading you," Elena said. "I don't know which, and I don't particularly care. What I care about is that this truck gets in front of the right buyer." "Do you know who that is?" Joel said. Elena looked at him with the expression of a woman who has spent 40 years knowing exactly who the right buyers are for exactly these situations. "I know 3 people who would write a check today," she said, "but I want to make some calls first. Give me the weekend." She gave him her direct number and left. Zoe climbed down from her stool. "I told you," she said. "You did," Joel said. "Bellingham was wrong," she said. "He was. Are you going to be okay?" Joel looked at his daughter, 10 years old, standing in the middle of the shop in her school uniform with her library book under her arm and her mother's eyes and his stubbornness, and the accumulated wisdom of every hour she had spent on that stool watching him work. "Yeah," he said, "I think we're going to be okay." Elena Voss made her calls over the weekend. By Monday morning, Joel had 4 serious inquiries from private collectors, 2 of whom Elena had personally vouched for as capable of moving quickly and without complication. By Tuesday, he had 2 formal offers. The first was for $1.6 million from a collector in Nashville who specialized in post-war American trucks and who had, according to Elena, been looking for a truck of this specification for 7 years. The second was a phone call that Joel did not expect. It came Tuesday afternoon. The number was a New York area code. The voice on the other end was a woman, measured, direct, the kind of voice that was accustomed to conducting significant transactions without ceremony. "Mr. Carter," she said, "my name is Patricia Whitmore. I represent a private client who collects significant American vehicles and who has been made aware of your 1953 Chevrolet 3100 through Elena Voss. My client would like to make an offer. I'm listening, Joel said. $2.8 million, she said. Private sale, clean transfer, no auction house involvement, 60-day escrow. Joel sat down. I'll need to. Take your time, Patricia Whitmore said. My client is patient, but I'll tell you that he is motivated and that this number reflects genuine enthusiasm for the vehicle and for its provenance. Joel called Elena. Elena said, tell her you need 48 hours. He told her 48 hours. He spent those 48 hours not sleeping very much and eating whatever Zoe put in front of him and sitting with the phone in his hand, going through the math of what $2.8 million meant for a man who had been running a 4-bay restoration shop on a line of credit for 11 years. On the second evening, Zoe sat across from him at the kitchen table. What's wrong? She said. Nothing's wrong, he said. Dad. He looked at her. It's a lot of money, he said. It is, she said. I keep thinking your mom would have known what to do with it. Zoe was quiet for a moment. She would have said pay off the shop first, then put money away for me, then do whatever makes you feel like yourself. Joel stared at his daughter. She told me things, Zoe said quietly. Before she got sick, she told me things to remember in case she wasn't there. He didn't trust his voice for a moment. She also said, Zoe continued, that you were the most stubborn man she had ever met, and that it was your best quality and your worst one at the same time. Joel laughed. It came out broken at the edges, but it was real. She wasn't wrong, he said. So what are you going to do? Zoe said. I think, Joel said slowly, I'm going to counter. Zoe raised her eyebrows. At what? 3.5, he said. Zoe considered this with the seriousness she applied to all financial questions. Elena said the market supports it. Elena said the market supports between 3 and 4 for this specific configuration. Then counter at 3.5, Zoe said, and picked up her book. He countered at 3.5. Patricia Whitmore called back in 6 hours. My client will meet you at 3.2, she said. That is his final position. Joel looked at the ceiling of his kitchen. He thought about 14 months of work. He thought about 35 years in a barn in Kentucky. He thought about a retired schoolteacher's father driving a brand new truck off a lot in 1953 and never imagining what it would become. 3.2, he said. Agreed. He was quiet for a moment after he hung up. Then he called Elena. 3.2, he told her. There was a pause on Elena's end. Joel, she said, I need to tell you something. Tell me, he said. My 3 calls over the weekend, she said. One of them was Marcus Bellingham. Joel said nothing. I called him, Elena said, because I wanted him to know what he had dismissed in that parking lot. I sent him the provenance documentation and the trim verification and the comparable sales data. She paused. He called me back Saturday night. He wanted to make an offer. Joel still said nothing. I told him the truck was no longer available to him, Elena said. I want you to know that. Why? Joel said. Because he laughed at you, she said simply, in a parking lot in front of your daughter. Joel looked at the kitchen wall for a long moment. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me, Elena said. Price your next one correctly from the start. The closing happened 9 days after Marcus Bellingham had laughed in that parking lot. It was not 3.2 million in the end. It was 6.7. Because Patricia Whitmore's client, whose name Joel learned only at the closing table, a 73-year-old Japanese-American industrialist named Henry Takahashi, who had been collecting significant American vehicles for 40 years, and who had, it emerged, been looking for this specific variant of the 1953 30-100 for 11 years, had sent his own appraiser to inspect the truck on day 7. His appraiser had spent 6 hours with the vehicle, and had submitted a report to Takahashi that included one sentence that Patricia Whitmore read aloud at the closing table. The sentence was, "This is the finest surviving example of this variant in private hands in the country. There is no comparable." Takahashi had revised his offer the same day. $6.7 million, clean, private, no conditions. Joel had signed the papers at a table in a law office downtown, with Zoe sitting beside him in her school uniform, because he had not wanted to do this without her, and she had not wanted to miss it, and neither of them had said anything about it. It had just been understood. When the last signature was done and the room was clearing, Takahashi himself crossed to Joel and extended his hand. "Your restoration work," he said, "is extraordinary. My appraiser has been doing this for 30 years, and he rarely uses words like finest. I want you to know that." "Thank you," Joel said. Takahashi looked at Zoe. "And who is this?" "My daughter," Joel said. "Zoe, she found Elena Voss." Takahashi looked at Zoe. "You found Elena Voss?" "I read about her," Zoe said. "It wasn't difficult. She's in every book about post-war American vehicles." Takahashi smiled. "How old are you?" 10, Zoe said, "but that's not really the relevant information." Takahashi looked at Joel. Joel shrugged. "She's been like this since she could talk," he said. Takahashi reached into his jacket and produced a card. He held it out to Zoe directly. "When you are old enough," he said, "and you want to work in this field, you call that number." Zoe took it. She looked at it. She looked at him. "My dad needs a contract," she said. "He's the best restoration specialist in the region, and he doesn't have a long-term client. You have 40 vehicles. That math is obvious." The room went very quiet. Takahashi stared at the 10-year-old girl for a long moment. Then he looked at Joel. "Is she always like this?" "Always," Joel said. "Good," Takahashi said. He looked back at Zoe. "Have your father's office call my office Monday." "He doesn't have an office," Zoe said. "He has a shop, but I'll make sure he calls." Takahashi laughed, the kind of laugh that surprises a person out of themselves. He shook Joel's hand again, and then, with complete seriousness, he shook Zoe's hand too. They drove home in the truck. Not the Mustang, Joel's own truck, old, reliable, with a check engine light that had been on for 3 years that Joel kept meaning to look at and never did because it was always someone else's car first. Zoe sat in the passenger seat with Takahashi's card in her hand, looking at it. "Dad," she said. "Yeah. Mom said you were going to be okay." Joel looked at the road. "When did she say that?" he said. "Before she died," Zoe said. She said you were going to be sad for a long time, but you were going to be okay. She said the work would carry you until something else came along to show you." She paused. "I think this was the something else." Joel drove 3 blocks without saying anything. "She also said," Zoe continued, "that I was supposed to watch out for you because you were good at fixing everything except yourself." "She said that?" "Yes, she said it exactly like that." He pulled into the shop parking lot and sat there with the engine running. He looked at the shop, his name on the sign, the bays he'd built out one at a time, the life he'd built inside the work, because for a long time the work was all he could hold onto. $6.7 million. 40 vehicles in the Takahashi collection. A 10-year-old girl who had read the right book at the right moment. "Zoe," he said. "Yeah. Your mom was right about all of it." Zoe looked at him for a moment, then she looked back at the shop. "I know," she said. She usually was. She got out of the truck and went inside to her stool and her book and the half-finished homework she had left there that morning, and Joel sat in the parking lot alone for a little while longer, letting the quiet be what it was. 9 days ago, a man had laughed at his work in a parking lot and called it junk. Tonight his daughter had negotiated a long-term contract with a 73-year-old industrialist while wearing her school uniform. He got out of the truck. He went inside. He had work to do. If this story moved something in you tonight, drop a comment below and tell us what part hit hardest. Was it Zoe reading the book? Was it what Ngozi told her before she died? Was it Takahashi shaking a 10-year-old's hand? Tell us. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Every single week, we bring you stories exactly like this one. Stories about people who refuse to let someone else's wrong opinion become their reality. Share this tonight with someone who needs to hear it. We'll see you in the next one. The check engine light in Joel's truck went off the following Tuesday. He had fixed it on Monday evening after Zoe went to bed in the quiet of the shop with just the overhead light and the radio on low. It took 40 minutes. It was a simple fix, the kind of thing he could have done any time in the last 3 years if he had stopped long enough to look. He had just always been too busy with someone else's car. He thought about that for a while, driving in to work on Tuesday morning with the dashboard finally completely clear. Then he thought about Zoe's face at the closing table, small and serious and completely certain, the way she always was, the way her mother had always been. He thought, I think I've been okay for a while now, I just didn't notice. He parked, he unlocked the shop, he turned on the lights. He had work to do.